I've sort of slowed down in my old age from when I first started writing books. I was in my 20s, and I think I was doing a book every year and a half. I would do sort of a year of research and then 6 months of writing the book. Now I take 4 to 5 years to write a book. My last two books have been very slow. And yeah, I think research is always a total black hole. You never really know when you're done, but there is sort of the law of diminishing returns where you realize you're reading 500 pages to pull out 2 lines that are vaguely helpful. So those are the warning signs where you might be just about done. But also once you start interviewing people, I always end my interviews with who else should I talk to? And normally, if people give you 3 or 4 more people, then you can imagine what that branch looks like. You start with 5 interviews, and suddenly you've now got 15, and then you've got 45, and it can get large and unwieldy really quickly. But I also love that because especially when you're at the beginning of a book idea, you don't really know exactly how it's going to look like. You have a sort of imagined skeleton rather than a real one, let alone the flesh on it. And you're capable of making these abrupt changes if you stumble across something extraordinary. And I remember during my last book, I was writing a story about a non-fiction book about a very strange British spy who was involved in sort of the Sino-US relationship and how it came back together again. And he was a real kook who had been born into one of the great wealthy families in England, yet he went to work quietly for Stalin for a generation. And there was this whole section of the book I didn't even know existed when I started my work, which was that during the middle of the greatest famine in human history, where perhaps 40 million people died in China, he was allowed to bring a world championship to Beijing for the first time. So you had this extraordinary tale, that I didn't even know was out there of a guy rolling around, with cakes and fine dining and everything in the middle of this just extraordinary amount of human misery and death. I had no idea that existed when I first pitched the book. I didn't know about that coincidence until I was deep into my research and in China. So books can take on these sudden extra bones, like a extra arm that you didn't even know was there. And that was sort of the case for this book as well. You knock on a door and you hear a story that leads you down a path, and off you go. And I think that's, to me, one of the total delights of what I do. A lot of it is really unrewarding work. I would also say the most unrewarding work I did ever was for this book, which was trying to deal with the Miami Herald archives and all the other newspaper archives. They're not digitized past 1982. So if you want to deal with them, you are entering 1955 and you're sitting in a room full of microfilm, and you're going through days one by one with sort of blurry writing, and you're transcribing as you go. That alone took me more than a year. It's really slow work, but at the same time, you do have a sort of competitive advantage because no one in their right minds would do that. So you've got to make sure you're out of your mind when you make that decision. But it means you're going to be standing alone on top of all this research at the end of the day. And I think that's sort of a bit like climbing a mountain unaided. It feels very rewarding when you get there.